Let me ask you something, and answer honestly, just within your heart. What if the reason money feels stuck is not because you don't have a job, but because you were taught that a job is your source? What if divine provision never stopped, only the channel changed? Tonight, I want you to listen differently. Not with fear, not with logic, but with expectancy. Because what I'm about to share may disturb your comfort, challenge your beliefs, and yet quietly unlock a door you didn't even know existed. If you've ever wondered how provision works when income disappears, stay with me. This is not about survival. This is about alignment. Beloved, let us speak plainly and fearlessly tonight, because fear has been speaking loudly for too long. You say, I have no job. You whisper, I have no income. And then a quieter voice follows, trembling, how can I give? How can I tithe? How can I trust? But I tell you, with a certainty born of spiritual law, divine provision does not wait for a paycheck to arrive before it begins to move. Supply is not created by employment. Employment is only one channel, and the universe is not limited to one door. We have been trained to believe that money comes from a job, from a person, from a system. That belief is the root of anxiety. For the moment you think your good comes from a single source, you begin to fear losing it. But divine provision flows from an infinite source, and infinity cannot be unemployed. God does not get laid off. The universe does not run out of ideas. The river of supply never dries up. Only the human mind builds dams of doubt. Now listen carefully. Tithing is not a payment. It is not a bill. It is not a religious tax. It is an attitude of alignment. It is a declaration to life that you trust the law of circulation. Giving is not about the amount. It is about the consciousness behind it. A grateful heart with a small offering is mightier than a fearful hand clutching abundance. You may say, but I have nothing to give. Ah, that is never true. You always have something: appreciation, kindness, time, prayer, faith-filled words. When the widow gave her last oil, it was not because she had plenty, it was because she understood the law. She moved first and supply followed. Life responds to movement, not to waiting. The universe does not respond to desperation. It responds to expectancy. When you say, I will give when I receive, you are placing conditions on God. But when you say, I give because I know I am provided for, you activate a higher law. Faith is not logical, it is lawful, and the law works whether you feel brave or afraid. Let me say this gently but clearly. Lack is not your reality. It is a suggestion, and suggestions only have power when accepted. The moment you accept lack as truth, you begin to speak its language. I can't, I don't have, maybe someday. But when you speak the language of faith, even trembling, the atmosphere shifts. Words are living forces. They go ahead of you and prepare the way. Do not wait for the job to feel generous. Generosity creates opportunity. Do not wait for abundance to feel grateful. Gratitude creates abundance. The mind trained in divine law knows that supply often appears after obedience, not before it. The bridge shows up when you step forward, not while you stand still analyzing the river. I have seen doors open from places no human mind could predict. Money arrives from unexpected sources. Help comes through strangers. Ideas fall into the mind like gifts from heaven. Why? Because the individual stopped begging life and started trusting the law. They stopped saying, I need, and started declaring, I am supplied. If you are without a job today, bless the situation. Yes, bless it. Say, this appearance of lack cannot stop my good. Refuse to curse the moment. Refuse to complain. Complaining is faith in the wrong direction. Instead, speak with authority. Infinite intelligence is opening new channels of income now. Say it until fear loosens its grip. Say it until your own ears begin to believe it. Giving in such a moment is a spiritual seed. Seeds are buried before they are seen. They are placed in darkness before they break into light. Do not dig up your seed by worrying. Do not cancel it by doubting. plant it, and praise the harvest in advance. And remember this: divine provision is not always money first. Sometimes it comes as an idea, sometimes as guidance, sometimes as rest, clarity, or the right conversation at the right time. Do not reject the form because it does not look like what you expected. Supply wears many disguises. You are not abandoned. You are not forgotten. You are not late. You are being repositioned. Life is reorganizing itself on your behalf. But it requires your cooperation. Faith is cooperation with the unseen. Trust is action taken without visible proof. So tonight, stand tall within yourself. Release the belief that your worth is measured by employment. Release the fear that says you must hoard to survive. Open your hand, even slightly, and say, I trust the law of increase. I trust divine order. I trust that as I give, I receive multiplied. The universe cannot ignore a consciousness aligned with truth. The doors that are meant for you are already marked with your name. Your good is not coming, it is seeking you. And when you move in faith, when you give without fear, when you speak without doubt, you meet it halfway. Rest in that knowing, speak it, live it, and watch how provision begins to chase you instead of you chasing it. When you look at your life and say, I have no job, the mind immediately tries to convince you that supply has stopped, as though income itself were the source of life. But this is a great illusion. A job is never the source. It is only one channel through which supply has flowed. Divine provision does not originate from offices, companies, contracts, or titles. It originates from an infinite intelligence that knows no recession, no limitation, and no unemployment. The moment you believe that your good is tied to a single system, fear is born, because systems can fail. But the source never fails. God does not depend on the economy to provide for you. The universe does not ask permission from human circumstances before releasing abundance. Long before you were aware of your need, provision was already arranged in unseen ways, waiting for your recognition and cooperation. Many people suffer not because supply is absent, but because their vision is narrow. They look for their good in only one direction and ignore the countless other paths through which it could arrive. Divine intelligence is endlessly inventive. If one door closes, it is not punishment, it is redirection. Often the loss of a job is not loss at all, but liberation, freedom from a channel that had served its purpose. Life is saying, lift your eyes, there is more. When you insist that money must come only in the way it came before, you unknowingly block new forms of blessing. The universe cannot surprise you if you demand familiarity. True faith allows life to astonish you. It is important to understand that supply responds to consciousness, not circumstance. Two people can be without jobs, yet one lives in peace while the other lives in panic. The difference is not in their situation, but in their belief. One believes that divine provision is active, intelligent, and personal. The other believes that survival depends on struggle and control. Faith is not denial of facts. It is refusal to accept limitation as final. When you quietly affirm, even in the midst of uncertainty, my supply is secure and active, you are aligning your mind with a higher law, and that alignment begins to shift events. The universe works through channels, but it is never limited by them. Money may come through unexpected people, sudden ideas, small opportunities that grow, or assistance that appears at the exact moment it is needed. Sometimes provision shows up as a solution before it shows up as currency. An idea can be worth more than a paycheck. A connection can open doors that effort alone could never force. But these things are invisible to the fearful mind, because fear narrows perception. Trust widens it. When you release the belief that a job is your lifeline, you free yourself to notice the subtle guidance that has been speaking all along. It is also essential to release the false belief that your value is measured by employment. Your worth was never issued by an employer, and it cannot be revoked by one. You are valuable because you exist, because you are an expression of divine intelligence, and that intelligence has a vested interest in your support. Life does not create without sustaining. If you are here, there is a plan for your provision. To believe otherwise is to believe in a careless universe, and such a universe does not exist. When you stop saying, I am unemployed, and begin saying, I am divinely supported while new channels open, your inner atmosphere changes. Anxiety loosens its grip. Ideas begin to surface. Hope returns, not as wishful thinking, but as quiet confidence. This is not imagination, it is law. What you consistently accept as true sets forces in motion. The unseen always precedes the seen. Long before a door opens in the outer world, it opens in consciousness. Do not despise small beginnings or unusual pathways. Divine provision often arrives disguised as inconvenience, delay, or redirection. What looks like a setback may be the removal of an obstacle you did not know was limiting you. Trust that intelligence greater than your own is arranging circumstances with precision. Your task is not to figure out how supply will come, but to remain open, expectant, and aligned with trust rather than fear. When you understand that your supply is rooted in an infinite source, you stop begging life and start cooperating with it. You no longer cling to old structures out of panic. You move with calm assurance, knowing that what supported you yesterday was only a symbol of what supports you always. Jobs may change. Income streams may shift, but the source remains constant, attentive, and abundant. And as you rest in that understanding, provision begins to move toward you in ways that feel not forced, but natural, almost inevitable, because you are no longer standing in its way. Many people misunderstand giving and tithing because they see it through the lens of fear instead of faith. They think of it as a demand placed upon them, something required before they are worthy of blessing. But giving is not a transaction where God counts your coins. It is a spiritual posture, a state of consciousness. It is alignment with the law of circulation, the same law that causes the tide to rise and fall, the breath to move in and out, and life itself to remain in balance. When circulation stops, stagnation begins. When giving stops, fear has taken the throne. Tithing, in its truest sense, is not about how much leaves your hand, but about what lives in your heart when you release it. When someone says, I cannot give because I have so little, they are not speaking about money. They are revealing belief. They are saying, often unconsciously, that supply is fragile, that loss is more powerful than increase, and that holding tightly is safer than trusting. Yet spiritual law teaches the opposite. What you cling to out of fear diminishes in power, while what you release in trust multiplies. Giving is the visible act of an invisible confidence. It is the moment you declare to life, I am not afraid of lack because I know supply is active. Even the smallest offering, when given with gratitude and expectancy, speaks louder than a large gift given with resentment or anxiety. It is important to understand that giving is not limited to money, especially in seasons where money feels scarce. Life is generous by nature, and generosity expressed in any form keeps you aligned with that nature. A kind word, a prayer spoken in faith, time offered sincerely, encouragement given freely. These are all forms of giving, and they keep the channel of circulation open. When you give joy, joy returns. When you give peace, peace multiplies. When you give trust, trust meets you. The universe does not measure your gift by its material size, but by its spiritual weight. Giving also shifts identity. The moment you give, you step out of the role of the needy and into the role of the provider. This is a powerful internal shift. You are no longer affirming, I am someone who lacks, but declaring, I am someone through whom abundance flows. Life responds differently to those who see themselves as channels rather than containers. A container fears being emptied. A channel knows it must remain open to stay full. When you see yourself as a channel, you stop hoarding and start trusting the movement of supply. Many wait to give until they feel secure, but security does not precede faith. It follows it. Faith acts without evidence and creates the evidence later. When you give, while conditions still look uncertain, you are not being reckless. You are being obedient to a higher law. You are saying, I believe that what sustains me is greater than what I can see. This kind of giving is a seed planted in consciousness, and every seed carries within it the promise of harvest. Seeds are not planted on mountaintops of abundance. They are planted in ordinary soil, sometimes in dark places. Yet darkness does not destroy a seed, it prepares it. It is also essential to release the idea that giving is loss. Nothing given in alignment with divine law is ever lost. It simply changes form. What you give goes ahead of you and prepares your way. It opens doors you cannot knock on with effort alone. It softens hearts, attracts opportunities, and aligns timing. Often the return does not come from the place you gave, because divine intelligence is not bound by human accounting. The return comes from wherever it can come most easily and most abundantly. When giving becomes natural rather than forced, joyful rather than fearful, you will notice a subtle but powerful shift within yourself. Anxiety about money begins to loosen. Gratitude increases. Expectancy replaces dread. This inner shift is the true activation of provision. Money follows mindset. Supply follows belief. As you continue to give with trust, whether in material form or spiritual expression, you remain in harmony with the law that sustains all things. And in that harmony, you discover that you were never meant to struggle for provision. You were meant to participate in its flow. There comes a moment in every life when waiting feels safer than moving, when the mind says, "Let me see proof first, then I will act." Yet this is not how faith operates. Faith does not wait for visible evidence. It creates the evidence through action. Divine law responds to movement, not to hesitation. When you take a step in trust while circumstances still look uncertain, you set unseen forces into motion. Life is not impressed by intentions alone. It responds to alignment expressed through action. The bridge does not appear while you stand on the shore calculating every possible outcome. It appears when you step forward, even if your voice trembles and your hands shake. Many people believe they lack faith because they feel afraid, but fear does not cancel faith. Inaction does. Faith is not the absence of doubt, it is obedience in spite of it. You do not need to feel confident to move, you need only to be willing. The universe is intelligent and responsive, but it requires a signal. Action is that signal. When you give, speak, or decide as though provision is active, you are transmitting a message to life that you are ready to receive, and life responds in kind, often more quickly than expected. Waiting for perfect conditions is one of the most subtle forms of disbelief. It appears reasonable, even wise, yet it quietly affirms that circumstances are more powerful than divine order. But spiritual law teaches that conditions follow consciousness, not the other way around. When you align your thoughts, words, and actions with trust, conditions reorganize themselves to match that alignment. What looks like risk to the logical mind is obedience to the spiritual mind, and obedience always carries protection. Supply often follows faith in ways that seem almost backward to the intellect. You give before you have surplus. You move before you feel ready. You speak success while the evidence still says lack. This is not denial, it is declaration. You are choosing which reality you will cooperate with. The visible world is always the result of past belief. To change what you see, you must act from what you know spiritually, not from what you see physically. This is why those who move in faith often appear lucky. In truth, they are simply aligned. It is also important to understand that faith-filled action does not always produce immediate, dramatic results. Sometimes the shift is quiet. A thought changes, a conversation happens, a new idea takes root. These small movements are just as significant as sudden breakthroughs because they indicate that the unseen machinery of life has begun to turn. Impatience tries to rush the process, but trust allows it to unfold with precision. The seed does not sprout the moment it is planted, yet the moment of planting is when growth begins. When you act in faith, you release the burden of control. You stop trying to manage outcomes and start allowing divine intelligence to handle details beyond your reach. This does not make you passive. It makes you cooperative. You do your part, and you allow the greater plan to do its part. Fear demands guarantees. Faith requires surrender. And surrender is not weakness, it is alignment with a power greater than personal effort. Many discover that the very step they feared becomes the turning point, the decision to give, to apply, to speak, to move, to trust. These moments mark the shift from stagnation to flow. Once movement begins, supply has something to follow. Life rushes to meet action rooted in trust, because such action is rare and powerful. Faith always moves first, and supply always answers. Not because you deserve it, not because you earned it, but because that is the law. When you understand this, you stop waiting for rescue and start participating in your own provision. And as you continue to act from trust rather than fear, you realize that what once felt impossible was simply waiting for you to move. Words are not harmless sounds drifting into the air. They are living forces that carry direction, intention, and power. Every word spoken sets something in motion, either building or dismantling, opening or closing. Long before circumstances change, language reveals what a person truly believes. When someone continually says, "I don't have enough," "money is hard," or "things never work out for me," they are not describing reality, they are instructing it. The spoken word is a creative command, and life, being obedient to law, moves in the direction of the command it receives most consistently. Many people unknowingly work against themselves by repeating phrases learned from fear, culture, or past disappointment. They speak lack so often that it begins to feel normal, even truthful. Yet truth is not what has happened. Truth is what is eternally established in divine order. When you align your speech with fear, you give fear authority. When you align your speech with trust, you invite a higher power to operate. The universe listens, not to what you wish, but to what you declare. Words spoken with conviction impress the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind faithfully reproduces those impressions as experience. It is not enough to think positively while speaking negatively. Thought is the seed, but speech is the water that causes it to grow. A single statement spoken repeatedly carries more force than many silent hopes. This is why affirmations, when spoken with feeling and consistency, are so powerful. They are not attempts to convince the universe. They are acts of self-alignment. When you say, "I am divinely supplied," even if circumstances disagree, you are choosing which authority you will recognize. Over time, this choice reshapes perception, dissolves fear, and opens awareness to opportunities that were always present but previously unseen. Speech also shapes emotional atmosphere. Words of faith calm the nervous system and restore clarity. Words of fear tighten the body and cloud judgment. A person who constantly speaks worry cannot hear guidance clearly because fear is loud and demanding. But when speech becomes intentional, calm, and affirmative, the mind grows quiet enough to receive insight. In this state, intuition sharpens, decisions improve, and timing becomes more precise. Right words lead to right action, and right action leads to right results. It is important to speak from spiritual authority rather than emotional impulse. This does not mean ignoring feelings, but refusing to let them dictate your declarations. Feelings change, but law does not. When you speak from law, you anchor yourself in something stable. You may say, "This looks uncertain, but I know I am guided." Such speech honors reality without surrendering to it. It keeps you honest without making you helpless. Words also go ahead of you. They prepare your path. When you speak success, provision, and order, you are clearing obstacles in the unseen. People respond differently to you. Opportunities align more easily. Resistance softens. This is not coincidence, it is resonance. Life mirrors the tone you consistently project. If your words carry expectation, life meets you with expectation. If your words carry defeat, life reflects defeat. Over time, disciplined speech becomes a form of protection. It guards the mind against panic and the heart against despair. It trains you to respond rather than react, and as you continue to choose words of trust, even in small moments, you will notice that your outer world begins to shift almost quietly, without strain. The struggle lessens, the timing improves, provision feels less forced and more natural. In learning to govern your words, you reclaim creative authority over your life. You stop announcing problems and start announcing solutions. You stop rehearsing lack and start affirming supply. And as this practice becomes habitual, you discover a profound truth. Life has been listening all along.